And in a way, we actually look at them as, for these young people, and many people look at them as models, and many young people want to get into acting and they want to get into fame, etc. They want to be famous, and so all of these are shaping the culture that we are in. And if you imagine that there are schools for acting and there's a lot of money that goes into this, is it something that we should be even partaking in? And so, in any event, what I'm pointing out here is that this is, like I said, just one very small aspect of how much the enemy has infiltrated our culture. If you look at the different videos that they have put out, that this ministry has put out as well, you will find the music industry. You will find, of course, because we're listening to these things, whether it's on the radio, we're willingly tuning in, or we are forced to listen to these things because we are in the mall and we're hearing all kinds of songs in the mall as well. We have to recognize who we are. And I think that that's the most important aspect of the teachings that I want to bring, is that we need to recognize our identity. Identity number one as Israel being Yah's people, we are set apart for his purposes and we are to become his dwelling place. So we are to worship him alone. And by worshiping him, we're saying we're bowing down to him. And that means that our lives are entirely given over to him and that there should be no defilement whatsoever in us that would contain anything of the enemy that we're presenting to Yahuwah. And so, what are those things that we put before our eyes? What are those things that we allow our ears to hear? What are those things that come out of our mouth? How do we behave ourselves? How do we present ourselves? All of these different things have an impact on our worship to Elohim. So, our worship is not just about our act of prayer or our act of going into church or our act of service. It's a daily thing, right? So the burnt offering was presented in the temple every single day, in the morning and in the evening. And the burnt offerings represent us, that we present ourselves as a living sacrifice that Paul talks about in the book of Romans. We are that living sacrifice given over to serve him. And so that attitude is not something that we just put on a daily basis, in the sense of I can put it on and take it off. The music director from the church that we were part of, Times Square Church, says your mic is never off, meaning that you are constantly meant to worship him, constantly meant to be in a state of burning, right? So the fire on the altar is not supposed to go off ever. And so the same way, we are constantly supposed to be burning for him. So what is it that we're burning? Are we burning in the sense of offering? I'm not talking about burning off sin, but I'm talking about burning for him as a living sacrifice. What's inside of us burning? What did we put in? What are we offering to him? And so today we're going to talk a little bit about what our purpose is, what's the glory that we're supposed to receive, and where we're going with it. What is Yah's desire for us? Okay, so this is sort of laying the grounds for something, more that we can get into. We'll get into more of it next week. But we're going to get started by talking about legal grounds and our purposes. Okay. So let me just share my slides as I get started. Okay. So we continue on the topic of the battle that we are in. If you recall, we have the backdrop of the book of Enoch for this study because we wanted to delve deeper into some of the aspects of the book of Enoch. And I hope that we can finish this particular series in a week or two, and then we can delve into another aspect of the book of Enoch. But this particular section is referring to Enoch chapter 6, 7, and 8, where we find out about the watchers that have come and they have found the women of men to be very attractive, and they decided that they would marry them. They made an oath, and we talked about oaths last week. They made an oath to carry out this task of or this iniquity, this abomination of mixing what is human together with what is angelic or what is heavenly. It's not supposed to be that way, because what is of heaven is supposed to remain in heaven, and what is of earth is supposed to remain on earth. And Yah created things to be of two different kinds, and the mixture of the two ended up bringing a great abomination on the world that has caused Yah to have to judge the world by a flood, by destroying all that the defilement that was brought up by the fallen angels. And we also learned that the fallen angels had taught the human beings all kinds of things, all kinds of secrets that they were not meant to learn. And they are exposing mankind to things that they were not meant to appropriate. And we mentioned that in many ways, a lot of these things are resurfacing today. We are finding that there are a lot of things that we learned through quote unquote science. That we're not supposed to actually know. Most likely, some of these things were meant to be are meant to be hidden from us. We're not meant to delve into those things. Unfortunately, they are clearly being taught in our schools on a regular basis. And when I say this, I want to elaborate a little bit on that, because in the same way as we have Hollywood actors and musicians being inspired by muses to a certain extent, by spirits. In the same way, many scientists also get their inspiration from um, places that they're not supposed to dabble into. Okay. And so, as much as there are some things that are meant to be good, there are also things that were not meant to be known for our own well being. So, we are supposed to be the guardians. We are meant to be his people that drive out all the enemies, and we'll talk about that. But what power do we have, or do we hold, if we don't, number one, understand our calling? What power do we have if we don't understand what it is that we're supposed to conquer, who it is that we're supposed to conquer, and why we're supposed to do that? Okay, so hopefully we can try to lay a foundation for that this morning or evening for you guys. Let's take a look real quick at our conclusion from last week. I mentioned, and this is how we started off even our session today, but the enemy desires to hold us away or hold us back from the purpose that Yahweh has for us, for the position that we're supposed to lay hold of. And so he might cause us to make vows that can bind us when we speak too fast, when we make promises that we can't keep, when we are pushed in a position where we have to make a decision real fast and we make a promise to somebody before Elohim, or when we have other entryways, which I mentioned at the end of last session, and we looked into just now through this clip. And I want you to actually go deeper into it and seek out how there are many other ways by which the enemy desires to entice us to speak with our lips words that tie us, through songs, which are sometimes can be incantations. They can be words that are worship to a different God. If you notice that there are some words that are supposed to be quote unquote love songs from a man to a woman, but in reality, when you look at the lyrics, they could actually be a worship song to a God. Okay. And when you understand that, and just as a quick diversion here, if you look at the music industry, there's one name that pops up very, very often, actually most of the time, with regards to authorship. Who is the author, the writer of songs that are famous in our pop culture today? And that name is Max Martin. And Max Martin, he is a Swedish guy who gets into a place of meditation and devotion and lights up his candles in his studio, and he does his worship session, and then he receives songs. And so if you've heard Britney Spears' famous songs, Backstreet Boys, all of these songs that many of us would be very familiar with because we grew up with them, many of those songs were written by him. And if you think of the fact that he gets inspiration from a demonic ritual, then those songs, who were they actually written by and who were they written to for? So we can understand that even through his um, inspiration, these songs are directed to a different God. And by worshiping or by singing them, are we not then indirectly singing them to another god? And that's the trickery, right? That's the, we hear a catchy tune on the radio, and immediately we're just like, oh, we're singing them, and we talk to friends, and we remember all of these different songs, and we sing them again. These are not just innocent songs, and the enemy desires for us to think that these are innocent songs, or they're just cute, or whatever it may be, when in reality they are songs that were written for an idol. And we saw today with that particular clip how the actors recognize that they become a part of the pantheon of gods of Hollywood, but the pantheon of Greek gods or Egyptian gods, they become objects of worship. And at the end of that clip, we saw that Yahuwah is desires for us to worship only him. And we ought to be very careful with us even elevating anybody ahead of him or anyone to any level that is beyond the human level. We are all supposed to be um, at the same plane human level and not elevated by anyone as either worthy of any praise, etc. Okay. Similarly, there are other entryways through games, through demonic books. That J.K. Rowling's was one that became so famous with the Harry Potter books, through which a lot of young people are enticed to speak spells as well. So these are all subtle tactics to bind us, and it's being done through our culture, through normalizing all of this, right? The enemy is wanting us to be completely numbed and by uh, uh, dulled to these things so that our spirits can easily accept them, our minds can easily accept them, and we no longer become sensitive to what is actually evil. So we are unable to now exercise proper discernment. And when the enemy comes in, we're not able to see he is now dwelling in my house. I have now invited him to sit on my couch. He is now, in my children's minds. And so it's very important for us to learn to now close the doors, to not just, first of all, to recognize what those elements are, to do a cleansing in our homes and cleansing on our computers and cleansing in our minds, and then rid ourselves of all these things and close the doors completely. I think this is a little bit of a sidetrack here, but it's interesting. Yahweh has really, I know that Yahweh has me on this path for a purpose. Of course, number one, for our own congregation, because we need to be aware of all of these things that are happening. We need to be equipped to carry out spiritual warfare in the way that he desires for us to do it. But and in the process of doing that, he brings along the right people to equip. And I found this fascinating because he has allowed for us to meet this lady who has joined our Bible studies occasionally. And she's one that has been encouraging me to delve into this. And she just arrived a couple of days ago from Singapore and had a stack of books. She said, "Here are the books. You need to be equipped in this. Here, you read all of this." And so she was going, through the books one by one. And incidentally, I was also meeting with another couple that just got married in early October. I wasn't able to attend their wedding. They're friends. She is a friend of mine since I met her in 2002 back in Singapore, and we have kept in touch ever since. We have grown, we have matured in the ways of Yah, and she just got married for the first time. So she introduced us to her husband on Thursday. So we get to sit down, and his testimony is incredible. And I thought, this is amazing that here I get to sit in front of this man who has this incredible story while I'm doing this series on spiritual warfare, spiritual battle. So I'm going to just really briefly tell you of his story, and hopefully this helps you to recognize how real um, these entities are. And I know that some of you are already familiar with that. Some of us, maybe we might be, how to say, we might be dulled to dull to those things, or we may say, oh yeah, it happens in, remote countries in Africa or, South America. But, we're not familiar with any of these. I just showed you that Hollywood itself is the seat of Satan, or one of the seats of Satan, where demonic activities are being, channeled through television, through the internet, through our screens. But there are also other entities at work in other areas of the world, and they may work differently, but they're very, very real. And so to tell you the story of this man, um, he was in, as a young man, as a young child, actually, his father was being sort of uh, sued by his company, by his boss, or at least a lot of trouble was given to him by his boss unfairly. He had no ability to defend himself. And as a result of that, because it was so unfair, the son, this friend of ours, decided in his heart that he was going to get back at this particular family that caused him so much trouble, that caused his parents so much trouble. And he recognized that since he could not do so physically, meaning that he could not go and kill a person or harm a person physically, he needs to try to find another way of doing this. So at the age of 14, he started dabbling into the occult by reading different books and sifting through the books and finding what's bogus and what's actually real. And he actually managed to, I guess, tap into some kind of power that would enable him to carry out what he wanted. And so he didn't go deep into what he actually did, but I'm going to tell you about his deliverance and how Yahusha delivered him from all of that when he was 25 years old, because he recognized as he was growing up that and as he was maturing as a young man, he actually had contacts with these entities. He had real communication with these demons. And he tells us that he knew that only Yahusha could deliver him. He knew that he did not want to go where those demons were. He actually told them, I am not going to be wanting to be where you guys are. I don't want to go where you are. So the demons knew that he wanted to become a Christian, and he knew this friend did not want to, he knew that he did not want to continue to follow them. And so they threatened him. Long story short, he did get, baptized. And one night he had a dream. And in the dream, he saw, because he and the pastor of the church that he went to took all of his books, his occult books, and burnt them. So he put them in a pit and started burning all of them. And I don't know if it was that night or within a certain period of time, he had a dream. And in the dream, he saw himself walking on a path going to that barbecue pit. And then the pit opened up and he saw his head in the pit. And so the demons basically were telling him, if you continue in this way, if you leave us in this way, this is what's going to happen to you. Something bad's going to happen to you. And he reached out his hand, sort of saw the heaven open in that sense, and reached out his hand, and a hand, held on to him. And so he said, I woke up and my hand was up. So it's almost as if it was a very real spiritual transaction that happened, but he knew at that point that he needed to continue forward, that this was an attempt to stop him from continuing in the ways of Yah and threatening him to be, so that he would be destroyed, or so that he would be turning away from the ways of Yahusha. And so this is a very real thing. So over time, I guess he still continued a lot of deliverance, even at the time of his wedding. And they're married at 50. At the time of his wedding, when they went through counseling, they said normally they would do only one session of deliverance from occult, etc., with the couples. But this time around for him, they did 4 different sessions to ensure that he was not bringing in any baggages into the marriage. But just to show that these are some things that are very real. Other stories that are very real for us, my husband and I, once we had gone out to pray. We used to go out and pray a lot for, just anybody that would meet in the street, and we just want to, get to know them and talk to them. So we traveled across the country, and There's one particular young man that we met once, and we just sat down with him, had a meal with him, and he heard his story. And he said, my grandmother had a gift, and she wanted to pass this gift down to me. And we prayed against it. We went against it. And that night, my husband was just assaulted by some kind of spirit that went on him, trying to choke him. And he couldn't call upon the name Yahusha until, he just battled and then finally called out to rebuke that particular spirit that was wanting to destroy him. And so these are things that we know are real. In some of you are from East Malaysia, you're familiar with the different spirits as well that are at work over there. These are not just hearsay or stories that people tell. They're real events that actually can plague people. So what we want to make sure of is when we come to Messiah, we close the doors to all of these demonic influences. And we also need to make sure that if we have had in our family line anyone that has dabbled into this, that we go back and repent from all of these, that they would no longer have an influence on us. We need to make sure that we are indeed cleansing the ground so that Yahuwah can come and dwell together with us in a clean and empty spot. Okay. So we need to confess the sins of our forefathers. We need to confess, like Daniel did as well, the practices that our forefathers have dabbled into. If we don't know, you probably know the culture. So, for example, in my culture, we have this thing called the turning of the dead, which is a really horrible practice. The practice is that every few years we have to go, or at least the people go into the tombs of the dead. And these tombs are actually sort of like, they're actually like built up mausoleum or caves, if you will. They're like little houses, and inside you have shelves where the bodies are laid. They're wrapped in some kind of linen. We wrap into, I think, 7 or 8 different layers of linen cloths, and we put the bodies in, and they each have their position. So that means that if you are part of the X and XY family, your place is in this particular area, and then another family is in another area. And these are all. This would mean this is my family tomb in the sense of my extended family. So my father, my father's mother, as well as the brothers, brothers and sisters are all in that one particular place. So every now and then, the family would go in to take the body out. So we don't practice this anymore, just to reassure you. Our family doesn't practice this because we became believers. But many families sacrifice an animal, and they take the bodies out of the tombs, unwrap the bodies, do some kind of ritual over them, over the bones, and wrap them in new cloth, and then put them back inside. I have no idea where this actually comes from. I don't even know. It could even be something that may have come from the idea of resurrection, where you the body will come out and will be, put into a new body, into a new body or something like that. Or it is really just very much something that is of the occult, that is inspired of the occult, and not something that, so meaning that it could have been a syncretistic thing where people took the occult and took the beliefs in Christianity and mingled them together, or it is purely something that is of the occult. Whatever it is, this practice is abhorrent. It's an abomination. And it is something that I've had to also confess before Yah and said, I renounce all of these things that my ancestors have done. I have no part in this, even if my father maybe has attended any of these, my mother has attended any of these ceremonies. I cut myself off from these things. So this is something that we need to do, because these are the sins that can pass down from one generation to another. But confessing our sins and confessing the sins of our forefathers and renouncing their wicked ways and the abominations that they have committed is not enough. But it is an essential step. The confession of our sins is an essential step. Then we have to walk in holiness. And we're going to get into that a little bit more today. But we have to walk in holiness because the temple has to remain clean. And then we have to shut the doors from any way that we could be defiled, whether through our eyes, through our ears, through the things that we speak, defiling not just what comes in. Defilement is not just what comes in, but it's also what comes out of our heart, right? We know that it is, Yahusha tells us it's not what you eat and the fact that you eat with your dirty hands that's going to defile you, because the Pharisees were condemning the disciples about not washing their hands properly in the ritualistic way. But it's what comes out of your mouth that causes you to be defiled. And then guarding our lips. So that means that we don't speak things that are too fast, too rash, too um, too quickly. We want to make sure that the words that we speak are meaningful, just as how the patriarchs spoke and their words had great weight, right? Today, we have all manners of conversation and the things that we say no longer really matter, okay? Um, yeah, so the question is here, can we have a confession, a general confession, and a renouncing ritual so that everything is covered? I think that one of the important things is to pray in the Spirit, to pray the Holy Spirit to reveal anything that may have happened in our past that our parents may have been involved in. Sometimes I found that some people whose parents had abusive of alcohol or were addicted to something, that alcoholism may not pass down to the next generation, but another form of addiction may come in. So it could be addiction to sugar, it could be addiction to whatever. But that spirit of addiction can still be passed on. And so it's the Holy Spirit can reveal that through prayer, even as we renounce the things that our family, in a general way, we renounce the things that our forefathers have done. And so we are called to be sober, to be vigilant, because our adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. And this is important because unfortunately, we don't realize that in the midst of our Christian uh, environment, we still have people, Christians, that are the instruments of the devil because they have allowed the enemy to come in and influence them in one area or another, because the walk in holiness is incomplete, because there is no confession of sins, or there is a holding on to bitterness or unforgiveness, and this allows for the enemy to storm in and take over and use that person as an instrument to bring destruction to others. So if you have seen people that cause division, they gossip, they slander, they say all sorts of things against other people, and they have no ability to see the kingdom of Elohim being a priority. These are people that are actually used by the enemy to bring destruction to the body. So when we think about how the church is full of division, there's so many denominations, there's so many this, so many that, we're not united, etc. Why are we not united? Is because we are in a place where there are people that are used for the destruction. The enemy is not going to be at rest, right? The enemy is not going to sit on the sideline and say, oh, now that you're Christians, I can't touch you anymore. No, now that you're a believer, I'm going to do even more. I'm going to sit where you are. I'm going to be in the church. I'm going to be in the position of the pastors. I'm going to infiltrate your Bible schools. I'm going to change the way that you interpret the scriptures in order for my perspective to be brought forth to the public. And so that's why we have false teachers, false prophets, people, I won't name names here, but very well-known pastors that are leading people astray through the gospel of prosperity, through the idea that, we can be like gods and we can, ascend to heaven and do all kinds of things. All of these different teachings, we have to be able to discern and depart from them. So it is important that we are walking in holiness, we confess our sins, we keep ourselves abiding in Messiah through obedience to the commandments. Okay? So why do we have to do that? It's important that we recall our purpose and our goal. What is the original design that Yahuwah has established for us? So this is a quote by from a clinical psychologist. I can't pronounce his name. Fitzhugh Dodson, I guess. He says that without goals and plans to reach them, you are like a ship that sets sail without a destination. And so, if we can have this in the secular, how are we not to look at this also from a spiritual perspective? That if we are embarking on this Christian walk or this walk in Messiah, but we don't have the goal in mind, and we don't have a proper understanding of what the goal is, because oftentimes we have simplified it and said, oh, we're just going to heaven, we are saved, and all of us can continue living our lives, and we will one day enter into heaven and everybody's just going to be happy. That's not the case, okay? That's not the purpose. First of all, heaven is not our destination because the kingdom of heaven is coming down here on the earth. The earth continues to be our destination because what is of heaven remains in heaven, and what is of the earth is what is on earth. So Yahuwah desires to make his dwelling on the earth, and we'll see that verse in a minute about his tabernacle being here on the earth, but he wants to make his dwelling here. So we have to understand what is Yahuwah desiring to do and what is our role in fulfilling his purposes. Colossians 1, verse 27 to 28 tell us this: to whom God would make known what is the riches of the glory of his mystery among the nations, which is Messiah in you, the hope of glory, whom we preach, warning every man and teaching every man in all wisdom, that we may present every man perfect in Messiah Yahushua. So the goal here is, the goal of Paul is to present every person perfect in Messiah. When it says, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect, this is not meant to just be a nice verse that we can quote because we have done our memory verses and we can quote it to a friend. It's be perfect. It is a command. It's a command to us to be perfect. What does it mean to be perfect? To be complete. What does it mean to be complete? It's just to be just like him. That's why Paul could say, follow me as I follow Christ. So we are to come to that place of perfection just as the Father is perfect. And so how do we think of that in the light of the teaching that we've received, which is, when I'm in Messiah, I'm perfect. Okay, but it's not by osmosis. It's not like that. It's that if I remain in him, then the process is going to be that I obey him. And by obeying him, I'm going to be transformed, and I'm going to be transformed to perfection to resemble the Father. So it's a process. It's not just by, my body and the Messiah's body are going to be one. We're going to merge together. His righteousness becomes my righteousness. And to a certain extent, yes, it's true, because the Father will only see the righteousness of Messiah, and I have to be in him. But the way that I'm going to be in him is going to have to be in abiding, in remaining in him, not just calling upon him and saying I'm wearing him and that's it. I have to do what he does, right? That's why Ephesians 5:1 says, be imitators of Elohim, therefore, as beloved children. So we are to imitate, we are to do the works of Yah. 1 John 3, verse 2 to 3, beloved, we are now children of Elohim. This is prolepsis, okay? Prolepsis means we are, but not yet. It's present, but also future. We are appropriating this for ourselves. We are now children of Elohim, and what we will be has not yet been revealed. We know that when Messiah appears, we will be like him, for we will see him as he is, as everyone who has his hope in him purifies himself just as Christ is pure. So there is an action that is required here from the believer, which is that they purify themselves in the image of Messiah. So this is not a pray and he will give it to you, or continue to have fasting and reading of the Bible, and somehow that nature is going to be a part of us. It is through spiritual discipline, but it's also to living it out, practicing all of this out. So our purpose and goal is, it has several layers to it, because we are individuals, and then we are individuals that are part of a body, right? We don't operate by ourselves. We can't just be Christians by ourselves, believers by ourselves, right? We are to be individuals. We are individuals who are members of the body of Messiah, and we have to be individuals who will be perfected, not lacking anything. So I need to work out my own salvation. I need to work out this salvation that I received inside my body. And spiritually, I have to live it out. I have to live it out physically. I need to lack nothing in my walk with Him. So, as an individual, I need to make the choice to cut off from all forms of sin, to cut off from ancestral worship, etc., to destroy the idols that my family has erected. I have to cut off myself from the ways of the world, and I have to decide on my own to live this life for Him. My decision is going to impact my brother, because if I'm not going to walk in a holy way, and I'm going to allow myself to dabble into whatever it may be. It may not be outrightly occult, but it can dabble into idol worship. I hold on to selfishness. I hold on to certain lusts and desires, etc. That gives a foothold for the enemy in my life. And because the enemy now has a foothold in my life, he can use me to be of an impact or negative impact to my brother or my sister. So my personal walk is not just for me. It's not just my personal relationship with Messiah or with Yahuwah the Father. It's not just my personal relationship. It is completely also the going to be impacting the rest of Yah's people if I don't pay attention to how I behave, right? So I have a responsibility as an individual to do what is right. Again, not just because I want to be saved, but because how I behave impacts my brother or my sister. And we have to understand how serious this is because unfortunately, we find that there are many people who see that it's just about themselves. It's just about their relationship with Yah. And we have to honor their relationship with Yah. But then they don't realize that they're, by not handling or not dealing with their own hurts and pains, by not dealing with generational issues that they may have inherited, they impact not just their family, their immediate family, but the family of Messiah as well, by bringing in their contentions and their hurts and their pains into the body. All right. So it's important that we recognize we need to change. We need to be transformed from within as individuals. Then, as individuals, we will be resurrected and obtain a glorified and restored body like Messiah's, right? So we will receive a new body that's going to enable us to do all kinds of things. So Adam, at the beginning, had a covering, which I believe was a covering of light, that was removed. And I talked about that in the past in one of my classes, but it's a covering of light that then became skin. It became naked. It became what was actually seen. And we see this in the Hebrew. But Adam was covered in that body of light. Messiah also was covered in that light. So are we going to receive at the resurrection that same glorified, restored, bright, shining body like Messiah received when he was on earth? Okay? So that's our goal and our purpose. We will one day receive that. But that's not what we need to have. That's not the only thing that we need to keep in mind, right? Now, I need to think of the body of Messiah as well. The body will need to be functioning according to its intended design as well, being a light to the nations and perfectly representing Yahuwah on the earth. So I, as an individual, am to represent Yah, but we, as a body, also need to be representing Elohim. That's why when people look at us, do they see division or do they see Yahuwah represented in the entire body of Messiah? So it's important that now I'm going to be my brother's keeper and I'm going to want to walk in unity with my brother and my sister. I'm going to want to disciple others because in the discipling of others, not only am I learning and I'm being accountable to the people that I disciple, but also those who are discipling are now going to be imitating my good behavior prayerfully, and I'm not there. So, but in the ideal state, we are to duplicate Messiah in us and in others as well. So now the body can come together and become the dwelling place of Yahuwah, where he will set his temple, right? He will come and dwell together with a perfected people, not with a bride that is with spots and with wrinkles. We know that he comes for a people that are going to be fully repentant, undefiled, keeping themselves away from wickedness, etc. So the intended purpose of man is to be the guardian of the earth, to multiply on the earth and to conquer the earth, to dominate, to rule, to reign, right? The whole aspect of Adam being on the earth and taking care of the animals is that he is now the king. He is the king of the earth and he's supposed to manage all of the resources of the earth. So we are called to fulfill that role as well when we return on the earth, and we will be the managers or the kings, the rulers, the princes that Yahuwah establishes on earth. Okay? Why? Because the government of Elohim is meant to be established. So our goal is a kingdom. Our goal is we are going to dwell in the kingdom of Elohim. He is going to come and dwell with us. What is it that we now have to be prepared to do? Can I just live my life and carry on the way that I want? Or am I going to be focused? I'm going to be focused on the kingdom of Elohim, the government of Elohim. All right? So we are returning to the Garden of Eden in that sense, right? He created, if we look at the Garden of Eden, I hope that we can look at it in a different light, which is that the Garden of Eden is not just a place that Adam forfeited. It's not just a place that he had to come out of and he was blocked from entering. That's not what it is. Garden of Eden was the original plan and purpose of Elohim. And that plan was thwarted by what Adam and Eve did. But his original design was that man would dwell together with him in his presence. So we are to go back to that. And we are to go back to that and have in mind that when we are given a resurrected body, when we are given the opportunity again to dwell in that perfected place that Yahweh intended to create, that he created on the earth, okay? He didn't create Eden in heaven. He created Eden on earth. That means that if Adam had not sinned, imagine where we would be today, right? And if all of us continued without sin, we would still be dwelling together with Elohim on the earth and being able to enter the Garden of Eden in and out freely. So we have to bear in mind that Yahweh desires for us to dwell in that garden and to live in perfection with him. So we have to prepare ourselves now to not be in the place where Adam and Eve were at one point in time. We can't be ever at a place where the enemy can come in and bring temptation to us and cause us to defile the garden again, okay, if that were to ever happen. So that means that I need to deal today with all of my baggage, all of my sins, all of the things that are holding me back because I want to enter into the land. Unfortunately, we sort of been told that Christ did it for you. He removes the penalty of sin from us, but the responsibility of walking perfection is still on us. That's why he gives us the commandments. Now, what defiles the land? There's so many things that defile the land, but there are certain things that particularly cause Elohim to bring destruction on the land. And that's unlawful sexual practices, because we saw that in the book of Enoch, where the angels mated with the women of men and they defiled the land, causing the destruction of the world through flood, right? But it's interesting that we see that the land, the wellness, the well-being of the land is tied to how man behaves. Adam had to be kicked out because his defilement would have caused the defilement of the garden, and therefore he could no longer come in. But also there's also the aspect of him being blocked off the tree of life so that he would not live forever in that sin. But because the angels have that, right? The angels have the ability to live forever. And that's why a special destruction is meant for them. It's an eternal destruction, meaning it's a eternal torment because they are alive. They're constantly alive. But all of this to say that we are meant to behave perfectly so that the land also can be perfected. But if man defiles himself he also defiles the land. So, for example, in Leviticus 18:24 to 26, it says this: on unlawful sexual practices, this is what it says: do not defile yourselves, but by any of these practices, for by all these things the nations I am driving out before you have defiled themselves. Even the land has become defiled. So I am punishing it for its sin, and the land will vomit out its inhabitants. But you are to keep my statutes and my ordinances, and you must not commit any of these abominations, neither your native born nor the foreigner who lives among you. So there is a law that applies to all the people. So it's not just about, let's say, we make a distinction, right? If you have Christians that employ non-Christians. Let's say, okay, assume that you're supposed to keep the Sabbath, okay? Let's take that one easy law. The foreigner himself will have to keep the Sabbath as well, because you're not going to have two rules, one for you and one for your worker. But in your company, this is what you're going to establish, because the law of Elohim is going to apply to everyone. You can't have somebody in your presence or in your surrounding that's going to break an important law that Elohim has established and that you're following. In the same way, people who live on the land that has been established by Yah cannot defile the land by building up their own idols. So this means that we cannot just have something where we just tolerate idolatry. And this is very strong actually in the Islamic world, where in essence, many of them view those of us who are not like them as defiling the land. This is a land that belongs to Islam. And so as a result, it is meant to be totally dedicated to the devout believers, and they need to eradicate all kinds of other worship, which to me makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense that it be that way, because that's how we are told to destroy evil as well around us. But of course, we don't do it by force. We are conquering the land in a different way, because we have to conquer the heart first, right? But originally, the fact that we have idols in the land causes defilement. And that comes from man defiling himself with all of these idols. And so we have seen, of course, that the people of Israel had to be cast out of the land many, many times because of their sins. Why? Because this place that was chosen is the place of Elohim. It's not just any kind of land. It's not just any country. It is the land of Elohim. Yahweh dwells among his people, and hence the place where he places his people to live in is where he dwells as well, right? So this here is a picture of the tabernacle. Many of you probably have not seen this. This is a design of the tabernacle made by an engineer who was playing around with all the information that was in the text, and realized it's impossible to design a tabernacle the way that we've always seen it, which is kind of like a matchbox structure. It's impossible to have something like that. This totally does not represent what the text actually says, but the tabernacle was most likely a dome. So it makes a lot more sense to have a dome, because if we imagine that the earth is flat, then there's a dome, a rakia, over our head, and that same dome is represented on the earth through the tabernacle. And so it's very interesting. I recommend that you go and look up Project 314. Project 314 is Andrew L. Hoy's material. There are books it was a book that he wrote. I encourage you to look it up as well. It's available, I believe, on Amazon. So you can, get a copy of that. But anyway, this just to say that Yahweh desires to dwell in the midst of his people. Deuteronomy 32, we have quoted this verse many, many times, and I will keep on emphasizing this because it's so important. It says, when the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance. Okay, so all the nations around us, around Israel, are inherited by the nations. They are not Elohim's nations. Okay, but Israel is his people. Are his people. When he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the sons of God. Okay, this is in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's not Israel. The text has been changed, but in the original text, it's the number of the sons of God, and we talked about who the sons of God are, and we know that they are people that individuals, or rather heavenly beings that were given authority over the nations. Okay, but Yahuwah's portion is his people. Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. So this is why it is crucial, absolutely crucial for us to understand that when we are in the nations that we're in, we are under the authority of other entities. We are in foreign territory. We belong to Elohim. We create in our space a position for him. We become part of him, but we still need to be regathered. We need to be regathered into one place where he will come and dwell with us. That's why if you read through the prophets and you read about the regathering of the nations, it's all of us in different locations coming together and living together and being that dwelling place of Elohim. That's important for us to understand. We are not just, again, as little individuals living our lives and doing our own thing. We need to look forward to the regathering of the nations that is a necessary step for Yahuwah to come and dwell together with us. Of course, we all have our relationship with Yah, but one day together we will be as one and he will dwell with us. And Revelation 21:3 tells us this, and I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, behold, the tabernacle of Elohim is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be their people. God himself will be with them and be their God. Okay? Now, some of you are familiar with this picture. Those of you who are in Malaysia would have seen this many, many times. This is a very typical sight in Malaysia because everywhere you go, under trees, near restaurants, at the entrance of buildings, you have this little altar that people place there to worship their God. So it's very, very common to see this little worship place, and people come in, and you've seen this in the towns as well. People drive to a shrine, they come and put food at the shrine, they light up incense and offer incense because people want to have their businesses blessed, they want to have their families blessed, and this is what they do. But the land ends up being defiled by these elements that are placed all over the country. And defilement breeds defilement, right? Defilement proceeds from acts of wickedness committed by men, which include sexual immorality and idolatry. So we saw that in Leviticus 18 that we just read. Numbers 35 also says this, do not pollute the land where you live, for bloodshed pollutes the land, and no atonement can be made for the land on which the blood is shed, except by the blood of the one who shed it. Do not defile the land where you live and where I dwell, right? He says, I dwell in this land, so don't defile it, for I, Yahuwah, dwell among the Israelites. Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 7, I brought you into a fertile land to eat its fruit and bounty, but you came and defiled my land and made my inheritance detestable. So this is for us to understand the seriousness of the dwelling place of Elohim. And as he speaks of the physical land of Israel, we must look at it also as the bringing together of all of his people. Together as a unit, what does it mean? If we are his inheritance, we are the lot of his inheritance. What are we doing in our midst that cause sexual immorality, idolatry? Are we defiling ourselves, right? Because I said earlier, what we do causes defilement of the land, right? So if we act perversely, the land will be defiled and he will cast us out of the land. In that sense, we are in the process of being destroyed. Jeremiah 16, verse 18, and I will first repay them double their iniquity and their sin, because they have defiled my land with the carcasses of their detestable idols, and they have filled my inheritance with their abominations. Ezekiel 36, Son of man, when the people of Israel lived in their land, they defiled it by their own ways and deeds. Their behavior before me was like uncleanness, the uncleanness of a woman's impurity. So I poured out my wrath upon them because of the blood they had shed on the land and because they had defiled it with their idols. Isaiah 24, verse 5-6, the earth is defiled by its people. They have transgressed the laws. They have overstepped the decrees and broken the everlasting covenant. Therefore, a curse has consumed the land, and its inhabitants must bear the guilt. The earth's dwellers have been burned, and only a few survive. Okay, so the earth is defiled by its people. So what you and I do, because he looks at us, right? Primarily, it's defiled. The earth is defiled. Why? The defilement comes because there is a transgression of the laws of Elohim. They have overstepped the decrees and broken the everlasting covenant, meaning that in order for us to not defile the land, to be considered as defiled the land, we cannot transgress the law. What does it mean to not transgress the law? What are the laws? Isn't it interesting that that is the very thing that the enemy came and said, you don't have to obey the laws anymore because Jesus did it for you. You don't have to follow his laws anymore because that's done away with. Because now you receive your righteousness by osmosis, by just believing in him and calling upon his name, and that's it. But that's, it's very, very far from the truth. So we have to watch that we are not transgressing the law, that we don't overstep the boundaries, and that we do not destroy the covenant. So here, I just want to have a quick understanding that I've brought many times before, but it's always good to reiterate this, is that when the people of Israel were brought out of Egypt they were brought out to carry out a threefold task of, number one, entering the land that Yahweh had given to them, conquering the enemies within, even though they were giants, and by this learning to war and trusting in Yahweh, and then occupying the land and filling it with goodness through obedience to Yahweh's laws, which he gave to them before entering. Okay, but first, before you enter the land, what needs to happen? There is a process of deliverance. You're delivered out of Egypt. They were delivered out of Egypt in order to enter into the land. First of all, it's salvation and deliverance out of Egypt. Then, when you enter in, what needs to happen? You have to conquer the enemy, right? So you have to be sanctified unto perfection. So we talked about that we need to be perfect. How do we get to that perfection? He leads us through the wilderness and then to conquer the land. So you have to first graduate from the wilderness. And many people, as we know, for 40 years, they wandered in the land because they sinned, right? They went against what Yah had said. They had no faith to believe that he would deliver them. As a result, they were left to wander in the wilderness, and they were not allowed to conquer the land and obtain their inheritance. So Yahweh has given to us the inheritance. Jacob is his portion, the land of Israel. This is why it's said in Deuteronomy, when Yahweh rehearses through Moses all the laws and gives prophecy, right? So he's giving us this land. You have received the kingdom. Through Messiah, the promise is we will one day dwell with him. But you have to possess it. You have to conquer it. So first go through the wilderness, through the difficult trials, through the difficult places, through the arid desert, etc. That means through the fiery trials, through the floods, because in that process, he brings sanctification. He says, you need to be mine. So he's cutting off from us all the different areas that still belong to the enemy, that we have given the enemy ground. So now he says, conquer. We need to conquer. We have been given the legal authority to conquer. All authority was given unto Messiah. So now we are here with Messiah, the type of Messiah, which is Joshua, right? Or Yehoshua. He went and conquered the land one bit at a time. But what did he say? Before he went in, he says, are you going to follow? Because as for me and my house, we are going to serve Yahuwah. So first, it's an individual decision. I need to decide for myself whether I'm going to serve him or not. If I'm going to be solely solely focused on Yah, and I'm going to put all of my energy to surrender, not just to surrender him, but to conquer in his name, then I want to be a part of the company that will do the same thing. I only want with me those that have the same mindset, not those that will want to conquer the land because it's subservient, because I want my piece of land. I want to live in a beautiful place and be protected, right? We are not to be at a place where we just stand in a little corner of the land and just have a place for ourselves. We need to be among those that go out and take down the giants that are within. And only then, when the giants have been conquered, when the land has been cleaned out of whatever strongholds were established by the giants before, then we can receive glorification, and we can receive the consummation of all the times. In essence, when we will dwell together with Yah, then he can come in, dwell with us, and give us the full rest that we were promised. So this process of salvation is threefold in its step. And I hope that you can remember this, because it's important to recognize we have work to do. We have a job to do, which is we have to conquer the land as individuals and as a nation, as a people. There are things that we need to do. So there are different levels of conquest, so to speak. Again, myself, my family, and then the nations. And when I say the nations, this means that we're now tackling spiritual principalities in the heavenly places. And in a sense, we can't be out there speaking to tear down strongholds left, right, and center by looking at all the different things that are going on around the world without first dealing with ourselves. Because the enemy knows very well what our weaknesses are and can gain entryway to through us to bring more destruction, because we did not submit ourselves fully to Elohim. I'll share a story. I don't know if I share this with you guys, but there's a story of this particular lady, a particular woman that does a lot of deliverance ministry. And I've shared her material with y'all last week. It's Canaan Ministries. And in one instance, she mentions that there's one particular intercessor that went against the principality of one particular region. She just decided to sort of go on her own and bring it down. And from that time onwards, she was paralyzed and sick, very sickly, to the point that she had to come and ask for prayer. And the reason why this lady, her name is Amanda Bays, her ministry, like I said, is Canaan Ministries. Amanda goes to her and asks her what happened. And when she said that she had gone and interceded against such and such principality, she understood you can't go there as just an individual, because everything has an order and has its own ranking. And so we have to be careful with what it is that we're coming against, because oftentimes as believers, we pray, tear this down and tear that down. And, I rebuke this and I rebuke that. Remember that even the angels did not just simply rebuke Satan, right? So there is an order of things, in order in which things need to be done. And we have to put ourselves in the right category of the army, right? So we sang that song, Rise Up, or King of the armies. He is the Lord of hosts. He is Yahweh of hosts. He is the Lord of the armies, the general of the armies. And in the Old Testament, we see that the armies are divided, just as the Roman army is divided as well. They're divided into, for lack of a better term, different what's the word? It's not teams, obviously, but each one has their battalion. Is that how you say it in English? Everyone has the different regiments. So regiment, and sorry for butchering the words, those of you who are in the army here. But in essence, we all have a particular position, and we shouldn't overstep our boundaries. Nonetheless, first step is deal with our own issues, with our own sins, or else we will not be able to conquer any territory. We will not have the legal grounds to go in and bring destruction to the enemy, because the enemy will look at us and say, hey, you're still dealing with that lust issue, aren't you? You're still dealing with a lying tongue, aren't you? You're still dealing with that anger you have not dealt with. And so these things may come up as even more reinforced in that sense if we don't pay attention and we go out against what we're not supposed to go against, okay? So the reason why I brought up this whole aspect of Joshua and the land is because our body is just like that, right? So whatever happens in the body also happens on the land, and whatever happens on the land happens in the body. We together as Yah's people will be together and will be his dwelling place. And so as a result, we need to handle what's inside of us first before we can be gathered together with everyone else. The land was destroyed in Genesis 6 because of the defilement of the land, because of the sins taught by the watchers. So we talked about that. We talked about how the Watchers taught all kinds of things to mankind, and they um, taught things that they were not supposed, that mankind was not supposed to learn, between, making swords and weapons, etc. So this is something that defiled the world and caused the destruction of the world. Now, the question is whether we ourselves in our day and age have reached that same level of defilement. I think that we may have gone even beyond that level of defilement, because everything that we see in the scriptures that we're not supposed to be doing, we're already doing. I mean, the world is already doing. And we're coming to that place where we're now trying to mix what is created by men and what is created by Yah to be put together with, chips in the brain that help you in one way or another. All of these things that are supposedly, medical advancement. What does it do? Is it meant to make man eternal? And that's a dangerous place, because if man is not able to live forever, then because we know that we're not meant to live forever, and as a result, those who don't walk in the ways of Yah will be destroyed. They will be destroyed completely. But if Yah cannot destroy you because you've taken a vow, or you made a pact with the enemy to be eternal, you will still be destroyed, but your destruction will be eternal, meaning that you will be forever with um, the angels, the defiled angels, and burning together with them, if you have this received from the enemy, this body that is indestructible. This is a very it's a very real thing, because we are aiming for that in our day and age. So, as I mentioned earlier, we have received salvation, but did we stop there? Did we stop at salvation, and did we remain at the entrance of the land? Have we been made comfortable by the giants in the land, in a small corner of the inheritance that Yah has for us? Have we made peace with the little that we have been allowed to enjoy? Right? So we have salvation. We are happy. We have been delivered from certain things. We are happy with our, American dream, and that's it. Let's not trouble anybody else. Let's live a quiet life. Let's do some ministry here and there. But is there more? Is there more that Yahweh desires from us? And unfortunately, we have allowed for the enemy to reside in us and breed mental illness and diseases and all kinds of strife, murder, adultery in our hearts, because we've never dealt with some of these things. We've not dealt with the giants. And it's oftentimes because we didn't know. We did not know that these are actually giants that are still dwelling in us, and they have kept us to a place where we're just satisfied with our relationship with Messiah. And Messiah is wanting to take us further, deeper, and there is more freedom to be had. But can we go and take it? Can we go and conquer that if we don't even know that there's more than what we actually have right now? And so we need to take down the giants and the strongholds in our lives that have taken legal grounds and hindered us from enjoying the glory Yahuwah designed us to obtain. So one thing is to go back in the scriptures and look at the promises that Yahuwah has made to us. Go back and read through, what is it that we're supposed to be? And you can look at the analogy of the land. You can look at the conquest of Israel, the land of Israel, and what it was meant to be when the temple was finally completed, and the glory of Elohim came and dwelt in the temple, and the people were just so amazed at that glory, they couldn't sing. They were awestruck by the presence of Yah. That's where we're supposed to get to. But we remain sometimes at a place where we don't want to go to war, and we just want to be like some of the tribes. We're happy here. We're not going to be, crossing over to the Jordan. Yeah, fine, we'll come and war with you for a certain amount of time, but, we'll just be here. Are we that kind of people? Contented, and we allow for the enemy to continue to have a foothold in our lives. And as a result of that, Yah can't use us any further. He can't even bring us together with the rest to become one, to be regathered, because we have continued to entertain demons in our lives. And this is hard to say, because we think oftentimes that, well, Christians aren't possessed by demons. They're not necessarily possessed. Some people are, but we are not necessarily possessed. We are influenced. We allow for there to be a cohabitation. Let's put it that way. But it is our legal right to obtain everything that Yahuwah has intended us to have. All of Yahuwah's promises for us, the glory that he intends us to receive. All is what he wants us to get. But we can't just name and claim such promises without the lifestyle and surrender require. Okay, can we do that? We can't just name and claim it. People say, manifest it. Okay, put it up, which is actually not this is actually a new age practice to manifest what you want, okay, to verbalize it or to put it in picture. All of these things are new age practices that he doesn't want us to partake in, right? We don't just simply name it and claim it, but we have to live the lifestyle required in order for the promise to be made valid in our lives. And it's only fair, right? Because he's a covenant God. He's a covenant Elohim. He walks according to his laws. And also because the enemy is right there. What do you mean you want this promise for yourself? But look at your lifestyle. He gives mercy. Yahweh gives us mercy. And we see this in the life of Job as well, right? He was merciful to Job in many ways. He blessed him, etc. But then Job had to be tested. So all of us also have to be tested. Is our faith truly in him? Do we truly believe him even when things go wrong? So all of us have to live that lifestyle of surrender and ensure that when we are claiming something, we actually have the legal right to do that. Okay, because we can't be living in compromise. So obedience is absolutely required. A bridling of the tongue, a reining in of the body through diligent prayer, fasting, and spiritual discipline. All of these things are necessary in our lives. Exodus 23, verse 22 to 24 says this, but if you shall indeed obey his voice, okay, that's the primary condition, obey his voice, and do all that I speak, this is Moses speaking, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary unto your adversaries. From my angel shall go, this was his voice talking about Moses, yeah? Then I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary unto your adversaries. From my angel shall go before you and bring you into the Amorites and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Canaanites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, and I will cut them off. You shall not bow down to their gods, nor serve them, nor do after their works, but you shall utterly overflow them and break down their images. So it is a very stark image that we're painted here, where you obey, you do what I say. When you do that, then I'll be an enemy to your enemies. Then I will conquer on your behalf. So our role is to walk in surrender and obedience. Now, every one of us needs to take the time to investigate. Am I being obedient? Am I relaxed in some of the ways that I live? Am I making light of some of the commandments of Yah? Am I dismissing some of his commandments because I feel that they don't apply to me or I don't have to be? There is a reason why he says that you shouldn't eat of certain things, right? Because again, the demons, some of them possess these things, right? And we are partaking into what they are feeding us, what they're wanting us to eat. And they're saying, oh, this is a delicacy, go and eat oysters. Go ahead. They are expensive and they are delicious, etc. And they're not meant to be for us. So we don't know how Yah separates things, whether there's some things that he has, of course, he has made for human consumption. Those are things that he says, go ahead and eat those things. But if he says don't touch them, there's a reason why. It may not just be for health reasons, okay? Because we know that eating raw oysters, even recently, a couple got very sick and the wife or the spouse, I can remember the girlfriend died from eating those raw oysters. And that happens all the time. But in essence, whatever he has commanded, do it, because he has a very good and valid reason for asking us to do that. You shall not bow down to their gods, nor serve them, nor do after their works. So now we go back to the first video that I shared, the clip that I shared on Hollywood, and how it's so prevalent in our society. We idolize these actors and we look at, we're fascinated by, and I'm not saying us here necessarily, but in general, the culture is fascinated by what they produce, and we emulate what they do. We repeat what they do. We quote what's in the movies, and it's almost like a badge of intelligence that we are able to quote from some of these things because we know the culture. We are somewhat educated, but he says, don't do after their works. Don't even let the things that they say come upon our lips. But because we compromise with them, because we watch or we accept it, etc., we end up being powerless to conquer the enemy. In order for us to be powerful, we have to rein in the body, bridle the tongue, separate ourselves, clean our mind, let ourselves be fully immersed in Yah. Then only we are able to bring an overthrow, right? Remember that even in the conquest of, in some of the battles, the battle of Ai, right, where Achan took part of the spoil. And what happened after that? There was a total defeat. There was a total of defeat of Yah's people because one man decided to compromise. And unfortunately, that's why I say that as individuals, we have to make sure that we are living right before Elohim, because we will be put together as a body, and the body cannot have anything within it that will defile it, that will defile not only the body, but will hinder the conquest of the enemy by Yahuwah when he returns. So we need to conquer now for ourselves. And then when we come together in prayer, we also need to be to make sure that we are in right standing. And I like, if you watch this YouTube channel that I just mentioned, there is one interview, and I hope I remember to send it to you all. It's actually an interview of a Malaysian, and it's a Malaysian that I know. He's a part of he is a pastor of a Seventh-day Adventist church, and he tells a story of his wife and how he got into deliverance ministry, and how his wife, because the wife was grew up in a home where the grandmother was casting spells. She was familiar with demons or with spirits that she would see on a regular basis. And she and her cousins, it was a daily occurrence. It was something that, oh, you're waking up and going to the bathroom and go to the toilet. There's something there. There's just a presence there, and they're used to that. Until when she became an adult and married with a child, the entity started speaking to her. And she said, it's the first time they communicate with me. And they tried to kill her. They literally attempted to get her to jump off a window. And this is their condo. Apparently they have a floor to ceiling windows, and she ran for the window and bounced off the window. And I guess there must have been a curtain there, because later on in the story he tells us that he had settled the kids to go to sleep. They had already prayed for her. Then they sat down. He sat down on the bed, and she was there as well. And then she tells him, go and close the window. And he says, well, the window is always closed. And she says, no, they told me that they opened it. And so he goes to the window, pulls the curtains, and realizes that the window is wide open, and he has to stretch his hand out to go and close the window. And that it was only by Yah's grace, with probably an angel that was standing there at the window, that caused her to bounce off that window and not, fall off the building. So the enemies are present. They are doing their work. But in order for them to be cast out, there has to be spiritual discipline on our side. So this particular pastor says that when they do go out and do deliverance ministries and go to conquer against demons in people's lives, they need to confess their sins. They need to make sure that they are living right before Elohim. Are they perfect? Are they completely, sinless? No, but there needs to be a certain level of introspection, confession, and determination not to be in sin in order to be able to conquer and bring deliverance. So when Yahusha says, go out, he says, go out and make disciples. But one of the things he says as well is not just to go out and make disciples, is to make sure that we go and cast out demons as well. And how do we cast out demons if we ourselves are allowing there to be compromises in our lives? So The compromises are that um, not to say that they're not normal, but they happen because the conquest is progressive. Okay, the conquest of the land was progressive, and Yahweh already told this to the people of Israel in Exodus chapter 23. I will not drive them out before you in 1 year, lest the land becomes desolate and the beasts of the field multiply against you. By little and little I will drive them out from before you until you be increased and inherit the land. And I will set your bounds from the Red Sea, even unto the sea of the Philistines, and from the desert into the river. For I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and you shall drive them out before you. You shall make no covenant with them, nor with their gods. They shall not dwell in your land, lest they make you sin against me. For if you serve their gods, it will surely be a snare unto you. Okay? So the reason why he hasn't given us complete victory all at once. First of all, it's not his job. Okay? That's not what he purposed to do. He has given us the deliverance, he has given us the power, he's given us the word, he's given to us the method by which we are to defeat, but ultimately, if the enemy is from earth, it will be conquered by what's on earth, right? So we have to do that work. He is not going to do that work on our behalf. It is our job to carry out this job. So that's why he says these are the parameters. The parameters are you need to obey my voice. And if you do that, my angel will be able to work on your behalf. He cannot work on our behalf if we are walking in sin. In essence, if you are compromising like Achan compromised, there will be no victory for you, but there will be a complete defeat instead. That's why, again, our personal walk is essential for the wellness and the well-being of the entire body. Then the entire body together has to make a conscious decision to walk in the ways of Elohim. All right? And that's why I believe that Paul says, cast out the person who's walking in sin. Don't let them eat with you because you end up having actually defeat within you and you end up compromising with the presence of Yah and what he wants to do through you when you are allowing for the enemy to take residence in your midst, for someone who is not wanting to walk in repentance. But he says, I will drive them out little by little because we can't handle it. We can't handle a sudden cleansing of the land. So now imagine the land is completely cleansed out from the giants. What happens? The beasts of the field multiply against you because you're not there to conquer the beasts. You still have a lot to do, and you're unable to handle all of that. So lastly, once you have conquered little by little, then only the land can be occupied. So then we gain the grounds, we get to occupy the entire field, the entire ground when we have conquered every little giant, every inch that Yahuwah has purposed for us to have. The same principle, okay, that he brings forth in Exodus chapter 23 is the same principle of Luke 11:24-26, where it says, when an unclean spirit comes out of a man, it passes through arid places, seeking rest, and does not find it. Then it says, I will return to the house I left. On its return, it finds the house swept clean and put in order. Then it goes and brings 7 other spirits more wicked than itself, and they go in and dwell there. And the final plight of that man is worse than the first. And people who are in deliverance ministry actually have said this. They will not just go and pray for deliverance for just anybody. If the person is not willing to be discipled, if they're not willing to walk and fill themselves with the word of Yah, they won't bring deliverance to that person. Why? Because when they do cast out the demon, and if the person does not follow through with discipleship and with a study of the word and spiritual disciplines, worse is going to happen to that person. So this is a principle that we need to recognize. So Yah is giving us grace to conquer. At this moment, he has called us to put every thought under the subjection of the Holy Spirit, to take every thought captive. And so here is a call to every single one of us this morning or this evening for you as I close, that it is our job to ensure that we walk in the ways of Elohim. We are called to obey him fully. We are called to follow after all of his ways, not to compromise, but we are to look within. Are there any areas that we have subjected to the devil? Are there areas where we have allowed for the enemy to come in to make us compromise, to dull our senses and our discernment? All of these things we have to have a time of introspection. So I encourage every one of us, take the time to let the Holy Spirit reveal where are those areas. And this is not going to be an overnight thing. My husband and I are going to start or he's already somewhat started, but we're starting this I'll call it a course, right? But they're really just material that we want to go through to examine our own lives and to see, are there any ties? Are there any covenants that we have made? Are there words that we've spoken that we've not fulfilled? And I mentioned to you last week that my husband is a type that when something happens in our lives, he always asks the question, do I owe anything? Did I say that I would do something that I did not do? Because we don't want any room or any legal grounds for the enemy to come in and bring destruction to what we're doing. But sometimes it's not just our personal lives. Sometimes it's when we are together, especially when we have a congregation, and we allow for certain behaviors to remain, and then it brings destruction to everybody else because that behavior is not dealt with, because the people that bring the behavior are not, you know, held accountable for what they're doing, and they're not discipled to that place where they renounce some of these ways of behaving. So we have that responsibility as individuals to walk holy before him, and as a body to watch each other, admonishing each other to walk in a holy manner, and to cast away from amongst us those people that are not wanting to walk in the ways of Elohim. So I'm going to stop here. I hope that that encourages you. We can continue to walk in this way. I hope that as I myself learn more, I can impart more to each one of you. And I'm happy to hear some of the maybe some areas that you have worked in, or you have, brought deliverance to people. What has been your personal experience? All right. So I'm going to stop here and we'll see you next week on what's that date? The 4th of January, 2025.